media blockade for a few days,
Hold
and then
on. It was where? Was it attack where?
it's in northern occupied Palestine. It was an attempted attack that got stopped, but it was under media blockade for a few days, and then it was released to the public, and they said it was Hezbollah. It was Hezbollah, and then some random group took responsibility for it.
Okay.
And Mr. Mario, may I answer to this guys and explain one challenge question from Patrick, then move on to the Iran subject, please?
Yeah. So I do want to go back to the Iran topic with Sasan,
Yes.
and
Sure.
let me ask this
Sure.
question. Actually, let me ask this question. Sasan, I want to ask you a question. Thanks for waiting so patiently. The Do you worry, knowing your position and sympathizing with the protest or the revolution? I'll use the word revolution because I think it's fair for both parties. The revolution in Iran. Do you worry about the outcome ending up to being similar to other countries where the revolution led to a worse situation and didn't lead to an improvement? Libya, Syria, obvious examples, and there's multiple others. Does that at least concern you? I'm not saying it's going to be the case. I'm just saying, is that a concern, Sasan?
Sure, that's a fair question. I think that's a question that needs to be answered. But at the end of the day, as Iranians, and I do appreciate us keeping the same objective reality of thinking Lebanese better understand the situation in Lebanon as Iranians perhaps would better understand the situation in Iran. Ultimately, with regards to what's going on with Islamic Republic, where we're getting at is a drought that is drying up the entire country, becoming a desert where it's going to cause massive migration over a course of time. We are seeing massive rise in issues such as even chemical warfare within primary schools. So beheading and just massive killing of thousands of people within a span of few days. So the situation is not necessarily a great situation at this kind of time for us to think hypotheticals of, okay, well, what's going to happen, what if. No, my friend, the situation
So can you
currently
tell me that? What's that example you said? Did you say massive beheadings at schools? What are you referring to?
massive chemical warfare in schools,
Oh,
massive
okay.
Auburn, in Auburn, we had 1,500 people, as the government itself is, alluding
Had
to,
a thousand, a
killed in
thousand five
3
hundred,
days.
a
In
thousand
three
five hundred
days,
people killed in 3 days.
correct, correct. So
Where was this? Where was this, Hassan? I might have missed it.
this was
You know?
only 3 years ago,
No,
and I'm
where?
surprised
Where?
that a lot of people missed it. That was throughout the entire country,
No, no,
in
in Iran.
in the entire country of Iran. Correct, you're talking about Iran, in the city of Abadan, in the
No, but sorry, the reason I'm asking the question is I'm trying to understand your point. So you're saying there was chemical warfare used within schools?
correct. That's within just the past few.
Yes, that is correct.
Correct. That's within just the past few months. The situation currently going on in Iran is as dire as can ever
I
get.
mean, I want to, Sasan, before I want to just kind of focus on that particular point. That's pretty appalling. 1,500 people died from chemical warfare at schools. Amir, do you know much
No,
about
just
this?
No, 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 no. You got it wrong. You got
Oh,
it
sorry,
wrong.
sorry.
1,500 people died in bloody November 3 years ago, and in the past month, there have been poisonings with chemical warfare in children's schools, like elementary schools, primary schools, and I can find the tweet about it and show it to you guys. I have the source code
Amir,
here.
yeah. So while you're finding that tweet, Amir, do you know much about that instance in terms of kids dying from chemicals in schools?
Yes, Mario. I don't know the exact number of fatalities. This story is real. I know that, and there's a group like they call it like the Shiite ISIS, like some pretty hardline, crazy Islamistic guys in Iran. I cannot accept that like the government like Khamenei is ordering this stuff. This seems like a little delusional, but yes, there's like a
Before going
group.
to before going to Patrick Xerxes on this particular point, I know you probably have other points. Just that particular point, is
I
it
have a
is it,
good
it
answer. I have a very
Yeah,
good
yeah,
answer
yeah, I know,
because I'm
I know.
involved in.
EP.
Yes,
Yeah.
like these guys, they're like crazy hardline, and
Okay,
some guys within the system think like the
Yeah, what was your
Taliban. Like
I
what,
understand.
girls should not go, and
what was
like
your
when they
question?
So, quick
protest,
question.
you
I mean,
should
how
punish.
are they moving?
Xerxes, so I was just asking about that chemical attack on schools. So we had, I think, Ricardo or Sasan was referring to it. Um, And then as bad as the government is, there's like another line when you use chemicals to kill kids. It's like that's fucking monstrous. So Amir did say this is a hardline group and not the government. Do you know much about that particular event, or is it
So
not enough
yeah,
information?
there was 100% chemical tax on women, as you know, in
Oh no,
Afghanistan.
it's this one is about chemical poisoning
I
for
know.
kids in schools.
Yes. So
Okay,
my,
okay.
my comparison to this is like there's
I
precedent for
pinned the
this.
tweet.
Thanks,
just talk
Ricardo. Yeah, thanks.
So
Go ahead,
there's
Joseph.
precedent for this. In Afghanistan, they don't want women going to schools, so they poison the schools. So they make sure women don't go to schools.
In Afghanistan,
In
yeah?
Afghanistan, this happened.
Okay.
So in Iran, there was people that were trying to do the same thing. You know, at first, people who supported the Islamic Republic said that there was mass hysteria. Actually, these people, these women were not experiencing anything. They're just seeing other people freak out, therefore they're freaking out. Later, the Islamic Republic themselves came out and accepted that there were chemical attacks happening inside of these schools.
Okay, was it from what we?
Yeah,
go ahead.
So Mario, I personally, I do believe it is the Islamic Republic, and I'll tell you this much. Nothing happens without these guys knowing. When women don't wear their hijabs, what we've seen recently, people would say, well, there's not women wearing their hijabs, it's much freer. These women are getting tickets even in the mail because there's facial recognition technology that they've imported from China, able to detect exactly who these women are. So the
hijabs are still you still have to wear a hijab in Iran. Are they starting to reconsider that law?
No, they're not starting to reconsider that law because, as it turns out, the Islamic Republic is very fragile. They understand that if they get rid of the hijab law, it is no longer an Islamic Republic. It's just like any other country, and they're not willing to make that sacrifice. So this is never going to be a concession that they're willing to make. What they've moved on from now, Mario, too, is where you would see outright in the open people enforcing this law. Now
let me just go to Amir. Let me go to Amir about that point. Amir, you had your hand up. What were you going to say?
Ooh, really brutal.
Sorry?
You were talking to me?
Yeah, you had your hand up, Amir.
Yes. I actually, some points that Chris made, I totally agree with him. Like, there's a crazy group. I didn't want to say something like specific about this. I actually want to say something about the Syria stuff. I don't think now.
No, I don't want to go. Yeah, no, not now.
Okay.
So Xerxes said, do you mind if I go quickly to Patrick with a question?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So Patrick, moving away from that chemical attack, what's your position on the Iranian government? Not on how much of an influence did the U.S. sanctions have on the protests in Iran, because I think we've discussed this at length already. And there's some kind of middle ground, and we've had a lot of panelists agree that they've had a little to moderate, even extreme impact. But your position on the government itself in Iran, what do you disagree with? What are your concerns with them, knowing your stance on the entire issue?
My issue on regime change in general and dictating to other countries what governments they should have, I don't think that's my business, quite frankly. I've got enough to handle with the United States government, with the EU, with the governments that are waging wars and destabilizing countries around the world with their public money. Okay, so first and foremost, as a journalist, if you're in the West, the axiom is that you hold power to account, you see. And if that power is imperial power, if it's destroying economies and killing millions of children through sanctions, as the United States government did in Iraq and what it's attempting to do in Syria, and dismembering whole countries like Libya, then of course that's first and foremost in my priority. The Iranian people can decide what their government is and isn't. And that's really up to them historically. And every single time we have tried nation building and democratic evangelism, I like to call it, it's been a massive failure. It's never been successful, and it's ended up with a lot of people getting killed. And it's increased extremism. It's increasing hardlinism. And this is a natural reaction. And of course, we love that because destabilization means more money for the military, kitty. Pure and simple.
So I see requests from speakers. Just remember, if you want to come up on stage, you have to tell me exactly. DM me so the team can see it. Tell me exactly why you want to come up. There's some questionable accounts requesting it, so please make sure you DM me with details on why you want to come up. So Patrick, I think your position of the US not getting involved, it's a delicate position. It's a fair position. I think it's one that's gaining more and more traction in the US. And there's many examples of instances where the US did get involved and it might have seemed noble in the beginning, but the result turned out to be creating more mess than bringing good.
Mario,
Mike,
it's always had
go ahead, man.
traction in America. If you look at the last presidential elections, George W. Bush ran on a no nation building platform because of the Yugoslavian war that just preceded it. And then the next president that ran, Barack Obama, I'm going to bring all the troops home on day one. He won by a landslide. Donald Trump won on no new wars, bring the troops home from Iraq. Donald Trump wins. Okay, so it's a winning position for the electorate.
When does the U.S. as the most
policy changes, Mario, after the election, and this has always been the problem.
So
Patrick, sorry, Mario.
Go ahead, bro. Now, I was going to ask a question. I think you'll have a similar one, Simon.
It's linked. It's linked to your question, and it's this. I mean, your position is that the U.S. government shouldn't get involved. The issue is, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, please do, that it seems like the Iranians won't get a regime change without the US getting involved, and hence why they're calling for it. I mean, am I wrong about that?
Yeah. So it's kind of I'll expand. Yeah, I'll give you I'll give you that question. That same question. I'll give it to you, Xerxes, right after Patrick. And I know Patrick's getting a lot of mic time, Xerxes. Just a bit of balance. But I would definitely want to get your thoughts on this particular question, Patrick. To add to Simon's question, when does the U.S. have a responsibility, a moral responsibility, when there's genocide in a country? Do you think these lines should involve U.S. involvement? I'm talking about complete genocide, obviously. That's different to the discussion we're having now. Or there should be no exceptions. The U.S. takes care of the U.S. and other countries deal with their own problems. I would love your stance on this.
Well, give me an example of genocide. The United States didn't intervene in Rwanda, and that's always used as a popular example of genocide.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying do you think they should do? Do you think they should do?
It's not a question. It's not a simple question. You can't do a sort of soundbite answer to this. I will tell you this: the closest thing to systematic genocide in the last, say, 30 years was perpetrated by the United States of America in Iraq. And Madeleine Albright said it was worth it that 500,000 Iraqi children were killed. So what do we do to the United States? Do we intervene in Washington for regime change? Does anybody want to vote? Can I see a show of hands in the room? Should we have regime change in Washington?
Xerxes, I'd love your response to this.
So I find this very
to the question.
I find this very interesting. Every time we talk about the U.S.'s role in Iran, it's as if like the number one thing we're talking about here is we want the U.S. to come in with B-52s. It's very funny. A lot of times, what we're asking for is how come every time this regime is on its knees, the U.S. comes and picks it back up with some sort of a deal and some sort of a negotiation. People always talk about the same people who want to say that this is all like U.S. led because they're very insecure of the fact that Iranians in mass hate this Islamic Republic. These people come out and say, well, these are all U.S. sponsored. The U.S. is pushing for regime change. I find this to be extremely funny considering the fact that the U.S. won't stop negotiating with these people. Even the EU won't even list the IRGC as a terrorist organization. So if these people are leading like regime change, like clearly they don't have their shit together. So I find this to be very funny. As it turns out, when we ask for some sort of a gesture to the Iranian people, it's that when Iranians take the streets, when they get murdered, for asking for basic things because this Islamic Republic is so radical, they can't provide basic needs economically, politically, and socially. When Iranians want that to change because their country's so rich, but everyone's so poor, the U.S., instead of hearing out the people and isolating this Islamic Republic, they reach out a helping hand and they give them billions of dollars. Yeah, we would like that to stop. So if you want to talk about how assistance is needed, how about you delegitimize what Iranians already in mass have delegitimized? The Islamic Republic is sitting on a gold mine and they haven't produced anything for their people. This is like a shame and embarrassment on monumental levels. I actually can't believe that they've done this badly.
So what should they do then? What action should they do?
What actions should they do? This is very interesting. When it turns out any chance they've had to moderate their behavior, to be a normal country, to allow their people to have free elections, to have free society. Well, here's the thing: is what?
I think. Hold on.
Oh, the question is what the U.S. should do.
So Barbara. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, I think the U.S., if they're going to start doing something, they should not go down the route of Robert Malley. What the U.S. is doing right now is they're still, to this day, just last week, they're holding negotiations in Europe to revive the nuclear deal. Why would you do this? Let me break this down real quick. The last time there was a nuclear negotiation, it was under the understanding that the Islamic Republic was going to moderate its behavior. They only doubled down on its behavior. They only said death to America more, and they went after U.S. targets more. So my answer to you is to do the reverse of that. This is a regime when they're on its knees, when your enemy is on its knees, you don't give them a helping hand to get on their feet so they can stab you. You put your hand around their neck and you choke them to the ground. Okay, so that's what I think when it comes to the Islamic Republic. I would like them to start entertaining more people like the coalition, talking to them more. I think they should isolate the Islamic Republic diplomatically.
Thanks for that.
So Suleiman,
we get.
Suleiman, I was asked a question, Suleiman.
No, it's just because I think
No,
that's exactly.
I mean, it's just like the way the discussion. We want to try and make it where it's more snappy and without being disrespectful. Your monologue.
Well, Suleiman. Okay, well, if people are asking me like questions, I'm over here like Chat GPT or whatever. So okay, go ahead, Bill. I'm just kidding.
yeah. So we don't want Chat GPT.
Guys,
I like Sliman. I like how you say it. Sliman's very direct. It's like, I don't want to be offensive, but your monologues go on for 15 minutes. It's like, it's like you don't do that. It's like, I don't want to be offensive, but you sometimes go too long. That's a better way of doing it, man. It's like, it's like I don't want to be offensive, but you talk too fucking much.
Very eloquent speaker, and
yeah, he knows his shit. Yeah.
So he's not boring. That's not the case. It's just we don't want it to be like one person talks for 20 minutes and then another person talks for 20 minutes. And then
go ahead. Yeah,
it just gets so boring.
You know what I've you know what I've realized, Slayman? It's like people have been telling it to me for a while, but especially we saw this in the last week with the stuff we've seen and the people we've spoken to. Like now, probably the Iranian government might not be too friendly, so I'm gonna have to cross out Iran from the countries I can go to. Soon I'm gonna cross out a couple of Eastern European countries.
Speaking about yourself, I was a bit more balanced.
Yeah,
it's not going to be for so long because they're not going to be there for so long.
In general, man, it's just it's crazy. It's crazy, and like this too. I just don't feel like I don't like it to be able to moderate a space about a topic that's so sensitive and a situation that just hits so close to home for many people. It's really tough. I just want to be as respectful as possible and delicate.
And understand it. And even for example, now people who want the regime change. I mean, I've got so many death threats in this space, but I mean that you just got to deal with it, isn't it?
Yeah. Me and you both, Suleiman. So
and that's
okay. I get them from
and that's because and like I said, I don't mind because it's emotions, isn't it? And you shouldn't be getting it either, so it's unacceptable. Shima, thanks for joining us. I mean, we'd like to hear your thoughts on this issue. Any initial thoughts, and then we'll have some questions for you.
Hi, Solomon and Maria, and thanks for having me. I wanted to mention 3 things. People in DC area where I live, they're so afraid of saying the word regime change. They have been so because of many different reasons, because of what has happened in Iran in the past, but because of what US might have done in other continents and other parts of the world in the 60s and 70s. So they're so afraid of this. But they should not be so. And it is getting to change because it needs to change. In order to say what to do with the Iranian regime, we don't want your military equipments. We don't want your money. We don't want the US to do any of that. The only thing we want you to do is to stop negotiating with this regime. The second thing we want you to do is that we do not have a North Korean lobby group in the US. In fact, when I arrived to this country, there was a person from South Korea, and he said, it was my third day in the US, and he said, I'm from South Korea. I'm from Korea. And I said, South or North? And he said, if there's any Korean in the US, they're from South Korea. There's a North Korean here. That was 15 years ago when I had just come to this country. We don't have any North Korean lobby in DC. We don't have people lobby on behalf of North Korean regime. If there are people who lobby directly on behalf of Russia and China, there are some actions, even though with China is a little bit different now. They have those stations here in DC, and it's a little bit different, but we don't allow them literally. But when it comes to Islamic Republic of Iran, which is so different than China and Russia, the main difference with China and Russia is that the Islamic Republic regime is a theocratic regime. It is not about politics for them. It's about ideology. And a regime that is about ideology and a religious fanatic ideology is very dangerous, not only to its own people, but to the global security. So even if you want to compare with that, say, Iran, China, Russia triangle, The Iranian regime is different because it doesn't even let their women wear what they want, let their men go do what they want to do. As opposed to China and Russia, people go party, go drink. Those even don't exist in Iran. People go maybe to the